quite excited to chat all things voice, fixing audio quality issues, simulations, and lots more. Maybe for everyone kind of watching, would love to maybe start with intros. Um, if you want to go first.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm one of the co-founders of a startup called ai-coustics. We have set out to make audio quality and, well, specifically speech quality better for, I would say, content and communication in general. We have worked a lot in the communication space, broadcasting, where we try to make, I think, content recordings, something that we do at the moment, for example, but also on a larger scale for like broadcasters, better in terms of quality, especially when it comes to not everyone has a very high quality microphone at home, not like, a recording studio environment. And we try to give everyone technology that they can basically sound like, they're in a recording studio. And now we're also approaching a bit more the voice agent space, where we think that we can also improve the audio input quality, not so much for the human ear, and the, I would say, subjective perception that we have as humans, but also how can we improve audio input quality when it comes to, you know, automatic speech recognition algorithms or voice activity detection. So how can we make these voice agent systems more robust and resilient when it comes to different audio input devices, or when it comes to very challenging and different sort of like, acoustic scenarios? Because you never know, like if you are in an agent call, if you like sort of like have an outbound call, where do you reach
Mhm.
people? Could be somewhere in a tram and outside, could be in a busy environment, could be that someone has a landline. So it's very unpredictable what sort of like, end user devices and environments you find. That's our
Mhm.
task.
Got it. Makes sense. Are you doing then background noise cancellation? Are you, doing some kind of transformation on the raw audio packets coming through? Like, what's the precise use
Yeah,
case?
good question. So background noise is a very obvious, I would say, yeah, problem when it comes to speech quality and intelligibility as well. We have a few other, I would say, audio disturbances on basically on the radar, on the map. So sometimes even like smaller, larger rooms, like room resonances, reverb can hinder intelligibility. People sometimes are being a bit further away from the microphone. Imagine you have a phone on speakerphone, for example.
Mhm.
Any type of like every device has a bit of a different sort of like frequency response. So it's different if you call in from an iPhone versus you call in from like a landline, which has a lower sampling rate. So the audio devices are very different and have different sort of like yeah, I'd say, characteristics in that sense. But then there's also a few digital artifacts. Audio can clip, it can distort. Different compression algorithms have an impact on it. So really think about what happens to an audio in the whole signal flow pipeline. Some of these
Mhm.
artifacts happen in the analog world. Some of these artifacts can happen in the more digital world. And we think about speech and audio quality, not just in terms of denoising, but like what are all the different possibilities and degradations that can happen to an audio signal in this analog and digital signal flow.
Got it. Makes sense to me. Like reverb, echo, like feedback loops. Like, would those also be examples of
Yeah,
degradations
yeah,
that
yeah.
would
So
be
if
kind
you
of
think
high
about
impact?
if you think about the full, it's probably, if someone is speaking, this person is in an physical room, like there's room acoustics happening, sort of like sound waves bouncing off the walls, and your room geometry. The further you away, like the less direct sound you have, and that's often a problem. So there's the acoustics and the real world that happen first. Then it hits sort of like a transducer that can be, so that's a microphone. It can be, in a smartphone. It can be in a laptop. There's different transducers and different, microphones and different devices. Then sort of like it gets into, your device. There's an analog to digital conversion. And then basically your signal is, well, zeros and ones more or less. That means that doesn't mean that there's still no that this is perfect now. So there can, codec compressions can then happen, or you can clip an audio in the digital way or a digital form as well. So yeah, that's kind of like the signal chain that normally happens from like a word leaves our like mouth basically until like it's being processed and then kind of like hits a receiver at some point.
Understood. Yeah, this reminds me of DSP, taking some DSP courses
Yeah. Yeah, I
when
mean,
I was back in Waterloo.
there's a lot of digital signal processing along the way, and that basically allows us to, make these different transformations. We work with, I mean, some of our, I would say, transformations or some of our algorithms have DSP elements. Most of them, to be honest, are machine learning based, so AI based, so to say.
Interesting. And how did you get into this? It's an interesting, very specific kind of problem to
Yeah.
target. I think not everyone is that quality oriented. I think obviously we're quality oriented. We want to test voice agents, we want to break them. And so we're trying to add, we're almost the other side of you, where we're trying
Yeah.
to add degradations and background noise and see how the voice agents, in our case, will behave. And you're, trying to solve them or trying to reduce the impact of these aberrations that are being added. So I'm curious, like, how did you get into the
Yeah.
solutioning part of the space? Whereas with the generator, you're trying to help resolve it to pass kind of clean audio to the ASR models, for example.
Yes. So I think our, the starting point was that both my co-founder and me as well, we studied a program called audio technology. So we've always been into like music and the audio side of things. We thought this is a very interesting medium, and yeah, I'd say in this study program, you can some people go out and build loudspeakers or microphones. Some operate more on the digital way of things, and I was always like fascinated about the machine learning and the data science kind of like part of what
Mhm.
can you do with, like audio signals. I think my original interest was sparked in an internship at Sony a while ago, 2014, where I learned about like source separation, where you can basically take an audio track and then like separate it into the different parts. So you would put an audio track in, and then you would separate into like a kick drum, a bass. Um, you can separate like harmonic instruments. I think by now you can even like choose the
Is that through
instrument.
frequency analysis? Is that through like a frequency analysis of like
Well,
where the signatures of where things end up being and then therefore separating them out? Like, how does that actually work? I'm
yeah,
just
so
curious.
yeah, so I mean, there's algorithms that work on the waveform, so on the time representation of audio. There's all algorithms also that work basically on the frequency representation. So you get from the time domain and the frequency domain with a Fourier
Got it.
transform, and then you basically have
Yeah.
you can imagine it like a spectrogram, like an audio image kind of where you see on the
I
x-axis
build these by hand. I
yeah.
remember building these by hand, doing Fourier transformations
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
in MATLAB.
it's basic math, true, and you can see sort of like an image of audio, like a frequency representation, then kind of, and a lot of these, that's true. A lot of these algorithms, both in source separation as well as what we do, they operate actually on the frequency domain, because there you can also use quite an amount of, I would say, machine learning techniques that are adapted from the visual domain, because you basically make an audio problem kind of like a visual problem when you take the waveform and transform it into, well, a
It's a good
spectral
trick.
representation. So it's a
It's a
2D
good
representation.
trick.
Yeah, that's kind of the trick. And this is how it worked, I think, or I mean, again, there's different algorithms for that, but this sparked my interest back in the day, like source separation. And then I got more into like machine learning and audio, and worked in my master's and afterwards in, I think, all, I would say, modalities of audio. So like speech, music, and like general noises as well. I was in a project, for example, where we would analyze, well, machines, or like the sound of machines. And by just writing machine learning algorithms, these ML techniques could like detect by the acoustics if a machine is going to break down or not. So I think we've been around the
Predictive maintenance,
audio.
some,
Yeah, exactly.
that
So
kind of
we've
body of
been
work. I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, so we've been around these like audio and machine learning domain for a while now. We were like lecturers for, well, a course called Deep Learning for Audio Event Detection, or Deep Learning for Audio Data, for a while. And then out of interest, because also we like to work on the technology, and that's sort of like our strong suit, but also like Corvin, my co-founder, and I, we both have played in bands or, done electronic music production. Our hearing ourselves is not like 2020 hearing anymore. So we have st some stake in solving this issue for ourselves, which is always a good thing as a founder. And we think that there's more well, people in the world, or now agents in the world, that would like to have this solved, the audio input side of things. And that's why we work on it.
Understood. That sounds good.
Yeah.
I think it's super high impact, what you guys are working on, and more people should pay attention to denoising or reducing or
Yeah.
cleaning, let's call it, the raw input coming through to your system, because it's garbage in, garbage out, largely,
Yeah.
um, is sort of how most things work in life. I'm curious, is this like a finite problem that will simply be solved by maybe your team over the next kind of year, 2 years? Or is this a similar scaling law kind of approach where you just need to keep getting, double the data to get linear performance over time? As in, what is the general performance curve here over time? Like, when do you think you'll saturate? Is kind of my question. And
Mm.
I know nothing about this, hence why I'm curious on what is the shape, the physics of this problem. From a very macro input
Yeah.
is some more training data, and then output is cleaner audio measured by some metric.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we've seen also, we had a web platform for a while where everyone can just upload a piece of audio, and like it's being enhanced more for like content creators, which now that we're going more in the B2B direction, that's not the case. However, we have an API platform where you can on Playground where you can upload this. And what I'm trying to say is here that it was very interesting. People would, you know, they have all kinds of audio problem that we never like encountered kind of. It's very interesting.
Mm,
It's not that we like, listen to everything, but we have mechanisms to like analyze kind of like the audio, like find out what types of like audio problems people would have and what, we should like focus on in training. And it was surprising, like people come up with more and more like very different issues that we haven't even thought of in the beginning. So there's more audio problems that we ever thought of, kind of, which was interesting. And I think so. Our approach is that we simulate these audio problems in a pre-processing step. So we destroy kind of like very good audio quality on purpose in our pre-processing, and then the machine learning model sees like a degraded, like in a simulative way, like sees like a degraded input and needs to like optimize this back to a very good quality. So what we need to do basically is sure we try to have a large amount and like variance of like pristine and good sort of like
mhm,
audio
mhm,
input audio. Also with a lot of different, I would say, nuances of what speech audio can be. So it can be different languages, it can be different intonation, different like timbre, it can be different like speech melodies. Like there's quite audio, and like speech audio is quite rich in like variety if you think about it. Like
mhm,
some
mhm.
languages, just by the intonation, like same word can have like different meanings and such things. So we try to have a lot of variety, in the, best quality input audio, but we also have to be very, very diverse when it comes to like how do we destroy the audio, and it needs to be very realistic. So there's a lot more to like simulate realistically, and a lot of like different input audio variances. So we see that things get better and better with the quality, but there's also, like, I would say, we also at the same time encounter more of these like different issues. So while we're at a stage now where I think both with the subtractive models that we train, where we like remove information from the signal, we also have like more generative reconstructive algorithms that
Mhm,
can
mhm.
input information into a signal, basically, colorizing a black and white picture, but for audio,
Yep, yep.
where we can help with most, I would say, issues, something like 80%, 90%. And if it's like slight issues, just like a fan in the background or something, that's easy to fix. But people upload more and more and have issues where it's really harsh problems, where it comes to like the level of we humans can't even understand what it's meant anymore, but we should still enhance it. And this sort of like is increasingly difficult. And there is something I'd say where you might see like a saturation at some point. But yeah, our scaling is variance in the original audio data kind of plus making our simulations very, very realistic and like basically capture through this pipeline all the different audio problems that can happen in real world. And that's a very, very large task where I think we need a bit longer.
Yeah, that's brutal. That sounds
Enhancements.
brutal. It's a big library of things that can go wrong.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's a lot of dimensions that can go wrong basically. And that makes it difficult to simulate. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think we have the same challenge. I think
Yeah.
broader for us, audio distortions is one of many things. For us, it's around what do the agents say? How do they say it?
Yeah.
Some people slur their words and are very fast talkers. So how do we simulate those to see what happens to the overall end-to-end performance of these voice agents
Yeah.
under various circumstances? But yeah, building a big library that's comprehensive is a super, super hard, task. And I think generally the convergence is around passing the Turing test, where, for
Mm.
example, if we combine, let's say, both environmental degradations, but also more human element of how people talk, how they speak, how they pause, um, what they say. If you combine these two things, we kind of approach passing the Turing test from a simulations first standpoint, and that becomes super powerful.
Yeah, I think like we see both. So like the training data itself for ASR systems becomes better and more, and we just collect more data. So like we also see that the ASR systems become more robust over time by, having more variance in their training data as well. And the second part, I mean, what you mentioned is like, how do you then test these systems? Like, how do you make sure that for any kind of input scenario that an agent might encounter somehow or a voice agent might encounter,
Mhm.
you have a solid test or a good test to tell the voice agent builder, in these kind of scenarios with like, I don't know, which are not super like challenging in the acoustic way, it's fine. But then, if it comes to more like, I don't know, a scenario A and B where, yeah, it can be noises, it can be voices in the background that are often like, disturbing as well, where the ASR system is sometimes confused, which voice am I actually like listening to or transcribing. And there can be, we've seen that there's quite some interruptions of agents by background voices, VAD being confused, interruptions as well when there's something
Yep.
being accidentally transcribed or being triggered by the VAD, but no one has actually said something. It was just like someone in the back or something else, and then the whole like conversation flow is not happening anymore. So there is quite a few failure cases that we are actively seeing. When it comes to audio input, and I think it's very important to like properly test this, and I think that's where you're doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Are there any specific, within the voice agent world, are there certain use cases that are really top line for you where audio quality by itself is maybe the biggest hurdle? One thing that comes to my mind immediately is QSR, like drive-through. That
Yeah,
is one area of extremely harsh circumstances that's sort of brutal.
yeah,
Another that I've seen to be pretty challenging from my side is maybe outbound style
yeah,
workflows, perhaps calling to people who themselves are in a pretty noisy, challenging environment, like factories. Like if you're calling like a welder or somebody who's at a job site, it's not the cleanest audio that's coming through. Those are two that come to mind. I'm curious from your side, what have you seen to be kind of your hit list, like top five most challenging
yeah.
structural use cases that you've seen to be pretty sort of hardcore?
Yeah. So the two ones that you've mentioned, we've actually also seen. One is the drive-through scenario where someone is basically, in the car, there's a car running. It's not that they are close to the microphone or close to like their phone. It's actually like a tiny bit further away. So that needs to be like simulated somehow. We also had a scenario that, you have outbound calls and you reach people when they're on the metro or they're on the tram or they're like somewhere outside-ish. It's just not a controlled environment kind of. We've also seen like, voice agents for like repair shops, where it's like naturally relatively loud. for
Hmm. Hmm.
example, or just yeah, I mean, classic is also like in not so much office spaces, but like, contact centers is something where there's actually
Hmm.
like someone else in like close proximity to you and that can spill into. So that's a few that we've seen that we have on the radar. That's kind of like where our solutions come in handy. But I'm also thinking a tiny bit further when you think about something like, physical AI and you have, you speaking to like a kind of like robotic device, and then you might and there's like maybe more distance between like the person telling something to the robotic device, or there's like two people like talking to it, and then there even needs to be like a separation between like, okay, now I understand that this person has talked, or now I understand, the other person has talked. So like, are there a separation of like different speakers that can confuse, or that needs to be somehow taken into account. So yeah, that's just like one step further, and but that's something we
Hmm.
already have in mind as well. That it's not just like kind of like the cleaning up audio, but it can also be like differentiating kind of inputs and such things.
That's cool. This is fun.
Yeah,
Anything interesting? Any predictions for 2026 that you might have for the audio space in general, or voice AI agents? Given that they're now, finally reaching production and people are actually doing real production grade deployments over time. Curious to get your take. Any kind of hot takes?
hot takes. I think generally like I'm very um optimistic that since these, or with all the techniques that we're working on, can be input audio, it can be testing, it can be no better training input, that things become more stable. And then I think in a lot of current, maybe like proof of concept or prototype-ish use cases, these become to a standard or something where they're being like rolled out on a larger scale, and the whole sort of like, I would say, yeah, industry becomes, I think, a bit more, not more relevant, but there's just like even more use cases unlocked if things become more stable, or more
Hmm.
compliant and all these things. So that's generally like super interesting for us, and it unlocks a few more use case. But I'm not sure if that's a hot take. It's rather sort of like improving on the robustness. And I think we both work on a similar goal, which is again making these systems in different ways more robust, and then contributing to having a more widespread adoption of agents and unlocking a few more use cases, especially I think in industries where there's a bit more skepticism or a bit more compliance necessary. I'm also like curious how we at some point maybe move from like testing to like maybe there's something like SOC2 for voice agents or something, where we have a bit of a more of a standard
Hmm.
in terms of compliance, which makes it maybe easier to adopt than for larger, very cautious
It's a great point.
industries,
It's a great point.
something like that. I don't know, do you
Yeah,
see
that's cool.
do you see something like this, like a compliance standard coming up at some point, or is this like
I
too
think
far in
so.
the future?
Yeah. No, I think um I think you're basically right. It's just a matter of either getting a coalition or just taking it more seriously to build this
Yeah,
out. Um, yeah, standards take time. They require
yeah.
adoption to some extent, some critical mass. And I think the activation energy is pretty high. But we're pretty motivated to help, build the standard or contribute to it in some meaningful way. So very much aligned. Super cool.
Cool. Nice, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Fabian, thanks for chatting. Thanks for going deep on Fourier transformations and a little bit behind the scenes on how uh, y'all think about quality and cases where you see this to be super, super high impact. I think there's definitely a lot of overlap in the shared mission. So always a pleasure to chat. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the invite on the podcast. It was a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.